Okay, let's dive in. What if the words you speak actually determined your community's power, like its ability to build its own infrastructure or, secure its spiritual life? What if language wasn't just descriptive, but was actually constructive infrastructure, an active tool? Welcome to the deep dive. We've got this incredibly dense, really fascinating source in front of us today. It details something called etymological hybridization. And it's all within this thing called the Delta T22 Kennemagorian framework.
Sounds complex, I know.
It is complex, but the core idea is powerful. It's presented as an Afrooptimist method for world building. They even call it prometautopian.
Prometautopian. Okay, what exactly is that?
So prometautopian is the end goal. They define it as a world achieving this kind of divine technical harmony. But crucially, it's not achieved through, say, politics as usual, or just new gadgets. It's meant to come about through the deliberate communal rebirth of language itself.
The rebirth of language.
Yeah.
Wow. So the central idea, the thesis driving this is linguistogenesis. Exactly. Linguistogenesis, the creation of new reality through the birth of a new language.
And the practice itself is called verbforging.
Verbforging. And the text is pretty bold here, calling it a verbkinetic insurgency.
A verbkinetic insurgency against what?
Against basically colonial semantic control. It's framed as this intellectual, almost spiritual war fought with word roots and prefixes.
Okay. So our job today is to really unpack the engine behind this. That's the Delta T22 thing.
That's it. The double transversal transjective quadratic rotation.
Whoa, say that again?
Yeah. Double transversal transjective quadratic rotation. Delta T22. It's their four-stage process. And this process is designed to ensure that when they coin a new word, it doesn't just stay an abstract idea, stuck in someone's head.
Right, it has to become real.
It has to cycle through these four axes or stages. And through that cycle, it gets embedded in physical reality and how the community heals, even in their architecture. It goes from just an utterance to actual utility.
Okay, let's unpack this then. I guess we have to start by really accepting how radical this claim is, that language isn't just reflecting reality.
It's constructing it like a hammer. That's the fundamental shift in perspective here.
Right.
Precisely. So the really revolutionary claim at the heart of this Kennemagorian project, it's that etymological hybridization is, and I'm quoting here, the sacramental act of world forging through phonemic covenant.
Sacramental act. Phonemic covenant. Okay, let's break that down. You mentioned ontological engineering.
Yes. Ontological engineering. They see themselves as designing and constructing reality itself, using these hybrid words. When they fuse word parts, these morphemes, they believe they're collapsing the distance between a word's origin, its history, and the function they need it to perform now. A successful word becomes this kinetic tool. It does something.
Okay, that immediately makes sense when you put it against the backdrop of colonial history. The sources are quite critical, right? They talk about colonial languages imposing vertical grammars.
Exactly. Vertical grammars. Think about standard sentence structure. Subject, verb, object, command, action, recipient. The argument is that this structure inherently mirrored and maybe even reinforced the political hierarchies of colonialism. Command and control built right into the language.
So the response isn't just complaining about it. It's this active thing called neoculturation.
Right, neoculturation. And it's really important to understand this isn't just like passive cultural blending or syncretism where things just mix over time.
It's more deliberate.
Much more. It's described as the proactive, conscious merging of different cultural layers, different linguistic strata into what they call covenantal novelty.
Yeah.
And here's a key point. It explicitly refuses linguistic purity. It's not about finding some pure pre-colonial language.
Okay, so it's not looking backward for purity, it's looking forward.
Precisely. It's framed as Afrocentric origination, generating new conceptual tools for the future, rather than just critiquing the past or reacting against Western ways of speaking or thinking.
That flips the whole idea of etymology on its head then. Usually, etymology is about history, right? Tracing words back to Proto-Indo-European or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Western etymology often feels like linguistic archaeology, digging up the past. But Kennemagorian hybridization makes etymology eschatological.
Eschatological, meaning concerned with the end times or ultimate purpose.
Yes, exactly. Concerned with ultimate purposes, with futures. The goal is, as they put it, to re-enter an Edenic grammar where utterance equals creation, a state where saying something makes it so.
Wow, okay. That's a huge ambition.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
And this forward-looking, purpose-driven approach gives us those three core terms we need to grasp.
Right, you mentioned them earlier. First was prometautopian, the ultimate goal.
Yes. That harmonious world state achieved through this linguistic rebirth and, importantly, technical stewardship. It's not anti-technology.
Okay. And the second was the process itself.
Lexicogenesis, the actual creation of a new word, but specifically where that word immediately functions as a living verb. It doesn't just describe an action, it is the action, or it enables the action directly.
A living verb.
Okay.
And the third one was that very long word.
Ah, yes. Teleontological. It's a beast, I know.
Teleontological. Let's try and break that down. Does it mean a new word has to do three things at once?
Basically, yes. It encapsulates the whole philosophy. A successful neologism has to be oriented towards an ultimate purpose, telos.
Purpose. Okay.
It has to maintain a theological grounding, theo, a connection to the sacred or divine as they understand it.
Divine grounding, right.
And crucially, it must have ontological effectuality, onto. Meaning it has to actually work. It has to have a real effect in the world, change reality in some measurable way.
So wait, a single word has to fix reality, connect to the divine, and serve a practical purpose. That sounds incredibly demanding for just a piece of language. How does one word carry all that weight?
Well, that's sort of the genius, or at least the ambition, of the framework. It radically collapses these domains that Western thought often keeps separate. Think about it. Telos, purpose, theo, divine, and onto reality effect aren't like checkboxes. They're supposed to be simultaneous functions baked into the word itself.
Can you give an example?
Sure. In, standard thinking, you could say God is great. That's theological. While maybe building a bridge that collapses, that's an ontological failure. The two aren't necessarily linked in the language.
Right.
Here, the word they forge for bridge, or maybe community crossing, must embody that divine technical harmony. If the bridge fails, the word itself has failed its teleotheontological test.
Okay, so let's use that example from the source text. Benoit, one of the practitioners, murmuring the term dominion keep while checking solar batteries before dawn.
Exactly. He's not just doing a technical check. In this framework, he's participating in an eschatological maintenance ritual.
Yeah, eschatological maintenance.
Wow. Yeah. Salvation, or perhaps community survival, is operationalized through the reliability of their photovoltaic system. The word dominion keep itself is teleotheontological.
How so? Let's map it.
Okay. Its purpose, telos, is sustainable energy management for the community. Its grounding, theolo, is this idea of stewardship, perhaps a divine mandate to care for their resources. And its effectuality, onto, is the actual reliable light that lets the community function the next day.
So the word itself contains the reason, the sacred duty, and the practical outcome.
Precisely. It turns checking batteries into a form of lived theology. Deeply practical, deeply spiritual.
That rigorous connection linking the divine and the mundane brings us to how they actually create these words. There's this method called playlosoda. It sounds fun.
It does, and the name itself tells you a lot. Play plus philosophy plus soda, like effervescence, spontaneous mixing. Playlosoda is the methodology for the verb forging, and it deliberately pushes back against the idea that serious knowledge work has to be dry or purely academic.
Right. The source defines it as ludic experimentation and joyful verb forging play, where speech literally condenses into craft. It seems like a deep commitment to play and experimentation as valid ways of knowing, maybe even superior ways.
That seems to be the implication. And there's a key rule mentioned. The new word has to work like a toolhead fitting its handle. It forbids just making up fancy words for show. Function is paramount.
So it's playful, but also very disciplined. And there's a process, right? 4 steps.
Yes, a 4-step process designed to make sure the word is tested immediately in, the real world. First is detection.
Detection, finding a gap.
Exactly. Identifying a sensory gap or a conceptual one, noticing some motion or a state of being in the community that doesn't have a precise word for it, something important that maybe existing languages, especially colonial ones, just ignore or gloss over.
Okay, so you spot a need. What's next?
Second is compression. This is where they fuse 2 or more root words, or parts of words, threads as they call them. The key is that the phonetic combination has to feel rhythmic, satisfying to say, almost like it clicks into place.
Rhythmic. That's interesting. Sound matters.
Very much so.
Oh.
Then the third and fourth steps are about embedding it. Third is attestation.
Testing it out.
Testing it in use. Repetition is the key here, not academic debate. Does the community actually pick it up and use it? Does it endure in daily speech and practice? If not, it fails.
So use proves value. And the last step.
Compostion, like composting. Older words that didn't quite work or Earlier failed attempts at coining a term for this gap, they decompose. Their conceptual nutrients and phonetic bits feed the new successful coinage. It's an ecosystem of language.
There's that great little story in the text that illustrates this, the term clayture.
Ah, yes,
Yeah.
clayture. Culture meets clay.
It apparently emerged when Miriam, one of the key people, actually slipped in some white clay while they were discussing local traditions.
Right. And instead of just being an awkward moment, the framework treats that slip, that tactile contact with the earth, as a moment of revelation. It created a sensory conceptual gap.
Detection. She felt something, the connection of culture to the very soil.
Exactly. Then she compressed clay and culture compression because it likely felt phonetically right, capturing that immediate link.
And then attestation, they started using it to talk about how their buildings needed to reflect their specific soil and traditions.
It perfectly shows how playlosoda treats the physical world, even accidents, as a source of linguistic wisdom. Tactility is epistemology.
Okay, so a word is forged through playlosoda. It survives attestation. Now, how does it function? It operates within this different economic idea, right? Gracenomics.
Yes, gracenomics.
Right.
And this is another radical departure. The source material claims value here is derived from grace, not extraction.
Grace, not extraction. How does that work?
It's positioned as a fundamental break from standard capitalist models, which are often based on extracting resources or labor value. Gracenomics proposes an economy based on what they call the Eucharistic exchange of grace.
Eucharistic exchange, like communion.
In a sense, the idea is that wealth isn't measured by accumulating stuff, but by the linguistic coherence of the community. How well their language holds them together and allows them to function harmoniously.
Okay, that sounds quite idealistic. How does a system based on grace and linguistic coherence actually survive alongside, dollars in global markets? Do they just completely withdraw?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The text suggests they don't fully withdraw, but they radically redefine their internal value system. The words themselves, the ones forged and successfully rotated, become the currency that maintains the society's structural integrity. The whole lexicon functions like a co-op bank of meaning and function.
So value is tied to maintenance.
Exactly. Look at their equation of gracenomics. Value equals maintenance divided by entropy.
Value, maintenance, entropy.
Okay. Their value system is explicitly designed to fight entropy, social breakdown, material decay, semantic confusion through conscious effort through maintenance, which is enacted through these carefully crafted words.
So if a word is misused, or maybe a hybrid term for, sharing tools falls out of favor,
Yeah.
that actually reduces the community's wealth because entropy increases.
That's precisely the idea. The word's value is purely functional in maintaining coherence and reducing decay. The words circulate like these little sacramental offerings, constantly repairing the social and semantic fabric.
Does this lead to new kinds of words?
Absolutely. It gives rise to terms like tool grace, which they define as the sanctification of labor through grace.
Tool grace.
So when Benoit and Miriam make a new hoe, and they name it or the act of using it tool grace, they aren't just being poetic. They believe they're enacting a theology of work. They're embedding spiritual intent directly into the tool's form and function. By using the word, they maintain coherence, and that coherence is the wealth that matters for building prometautopian.
Okay, this is fascinating. So that brings us to the engine itself, the mechanism that makes sure this linguistic currency actually becomes physical reality, the delta T22 rotation. Before we get into the four axes, can we just tackle that name again? Double transversal transjective quadratic rotation. It's like a lot. What does it actually mean in simpler terms?
It is intimidating, I agree. But it describes the journey the word must take. Quadratic rotation just means it cycles through 4 points or stages, like the 4 corners of a square.
Okay, 4 stages, got it. What about the delta T22 part? Double T.
Right. Delta T stands for double transversal and transjective. Let's take transjective first.
Transjective. Okay, in philosophy, you often hear subjective, objective, thinker, and the thing. Does transjective mean bridging that gap?
That's a good way to put it. It signifies the word's capacity to move beyond just representing something. It has to become, in a sense, the object itself, or at least an active part of the object or action in use. It ensures the concept has a direct, verifiable effect on the physical world. It jumps the subject-object gap.
Okay, and transversal.
Transversal means it has to cut across different domains of life. A successful word can't just be, say, a religious word or a technical word or a social word. It has to function effectively in technology and theology and community relations and maybe even architecture. It has to work across the board.
So the rotation forces the word to be practical, effective, multi-domain.
Yeah.
And it makes sure it never stays just an abstract thought. It's like the system's heartbeat pushing the concept out into flesh, community, buildings.
Exactly. Pushing it out and embedding it. So let's break down those 4 axes, starting with the initial spark. The first stage, the ultra axis. The ultra axis is stage 1. Faith ignition. Sometimes they call it word resurrection. Its function is that initial ontological declaration, the moment of commitment. To hybridize in this view is to graft spirit directly into syntax. The first gesture is described as Eucharistic. The word receives its new function, its new flesh, transubstantiated into its covenantal role. It's given its mission.
So this is where faith comes in as cementogenesis, the birth of meaning itself.
Yes, it's the act of collective faith, committing to use the word, to believe in its function, even before there's maybe concrete proof it works perfectly. It's enduring its use until the meaning stabilizes and starts creating that continuity they seek.
It's the patience phase. Trusting the word will do its job.
It requires that patience, that collective trust. The manifestation here is the word as covenantal rebirth. A great example they give is the term boikonomy.
Boikonomy. Okay, what's the mix there?
It blends the English build, the Greek oikos, meaning home, household, or even habitat, and economy.
Build plus home plus economy. Boikonomy, what does it signify?
It means the sacred economy of the homous world, a state where the act of building, the act of dwelling, and the act of communion are all one integrated economic and spiritual reality.
Wow. So using that word requires you to believe that building your house is an economic act and a spiritual act, not just, hammering nails for pay.
Exactly. The faith required is the patience to keep using boikonomy until everyone understands it that way, until it literally defines how they structure their homes and community. It becomes a liturgy of coexistence enacted in construction.
And that initial phase, that commitment, is what propels the word outwards, from the personal belief to the group.
That's the idea. It fuels the transition to the next stage.
Yeah.
The extra axis.
Okay, extra axis. Stage 2. This is communal synthesis or kinship syntax. Yeah. So if ultra was about individual or initial faith, extra is about putting it to work in the group.
Precisely. Application. The word has to move beyond just one person or one household. It has to be immediately applied in community practice. It has to organize what they call the guild circle.
Guild circle, like a work team or a craft group.
Sort of, but with deeper implications. Etymological hybridization at this stage becomes the actual grammar of kinship and trade within that group. A successful word at this stage literally equals guild making. It doesn't just describe the group, it actively helps structure how they relate and work together. Each word is like a brick in their shared social temple.
This sounds like that direct counterpoint to the vertical grammars of colonialism we talked about earlier.
It absolutely is. Colonial languages imposed hierarchy. This hybridization process, especially at the extra axis, is meant to enforce what the sources call flat geo-neonaturalism.
Flat geo-neonaturalism.
Yeah, another complex term. But it means ensuring that word parts, morphemes, circulate equally across different people and different tasks without inherent subordination. Language as leveler.
So the language itself becomes a collective project. No single person owns the word.
Exactly. The manifestation is this guild of tongues. A great example is the neologism olamakria.
Olamakria. What are the roots there?
It fuses a Yoruba root, ola, meaning honor or respect, then krio, mek, meaning to make or to cause, and Latin creare, to create.
Ola. Olamakria. To honor creation through collaborative making.
Pretty much. To honor creation through collaborative causality, it encodes a way of governing or organizing projects without domination. The word itself sets the rules for respectful joint effort.
That's powerful. Are there others?
Another one mentioned is kinfoforge. Kin plus info plus forge, perhaps, or just kin plus forge.
Kinfoforge.
Yeah.
Defining family work.
Yes. Defining family work or close community labor, but framing it with real theological weight. When they use kinfoforge, they're not just saying, let's work together. They're invoking the sacred bond of kinship to enhance their ability to coordinate complex tasks, way beyond just teamwork. The word builds the team's operating principles.
Okay, so the guild adopts the word, uses it to organize themselves. But does it actually work? Does it hold up?
Yeah.
That seems like the next logical step.
Exactly. It needs quality control. That brings us to the third stage, the meta-axis. The meta-axis is all about reflexive coherence. It's the stage of reflection, testing, feedback, what they call lexicometric reflexivity.
Lexicometric, measuring the words.
Essentially, yes. The community evaluates the word, but not through, like, abstract academic critique. They use kinemetrics.
Kinemetrics, okay. What are they measuring?
Durability and usefulness. Purely pragmatic. Does this word actually work in daily life? Does it hold up? It's where the language system observes its own process of becoming, constantly tweaking meaning based on lived utility.
So going back to that earlier point, Western etymology as archaeology, digging up the past, Kanemarorean hybridization is more like ongoing maintenance, or even contamination in a positive sense.
That's a good way to put it. The source uses that word, contamination.
Yeah.
The sacred productivity of mixture. It's constantly testing the word's structural integrity against present needs and future goals.
And the test itself, the kinemetric test, what does it ask?
It's pretty straightforward. Does the word help repair things, both relationships and physical tools? Does it survive being used over and over again, day in, day out, across different situations? Does it hold up transversely?
Okay. Is there an example for this stage?
The perfect example given is the term do code.
Do code. I remember reading that way. It really shows the transversal nature.
Exactly. Apparently, do code first emerged to describe a very specific technical thing, the pattern of condensation on their solar panels, which was important maintenance data for their off-grid system.
Right, purely technical.
But then, through repetition and communal use attestation moving into meta-testing, they started applying do code to something completely different.
What was that?
To describe the subtle, patterned way reconciliation happens after an argument. You know, how tension gently releases, how trust is carefully restored, that delicate pattern of social repair.
Wow. So it described water patterns on a panel and emotional patterns in the community.
Yes. It survived reuse across the physical and the ethical domains. It successfully mediated both a potential technical failure, panel issues, and a potential social failure, lingering conflict. That proved its transjective power, its kinemetric fitness.
And if it hadn't worked for reconciliation, if it felt wrong,
Then it would fail the kinemetric test for that application. It might be discarded entirely, or maybe just kept for the solar panels, or it might enter that composition stage, feeding some future word.
so this constant testing keeps the lexicon lean, functional, like a living toolkit.
That's the idea, a functional scaffolding for their reality. Okay, so the word has been sparked by faith, adopted by the community, tested for coherence. What's the final stage?
It has to come back inward, right? Back to the individual.
Exactly. It completes the rotation, moving from collective reflection back into the deepest personal reality. This is the intra-axis, embodiment. The intra-axis is the stage of the somatic word, somatic meaning of the body. Here, the concept, the word, must be physically embodied. It has to be felt within the individual's body. This is where that verb-kinetic insurgency really comes into play.
Verb-kinetic, language causing motion.
Yes. The claimed capacity of language to induce actual physiological motion and change, to trigger neural pathways, muscular responses.
So the act of speaking,
Mm-hmm.
the mouth, the tongue, the breath, they become architects of cosmology,
Mm-hmm.
shaping air density, maybe even changing body chemistry.
That's the claim. They describe this stage as linguistic yoga of the post-colonial spirit.
Linguistic yoga.
Where actually pronouncing a specific term causes somatosenses shifts. Tangible changes in the body's awareness, its feeling, its function, bypassing just intellectual understanding. It's the absolute opposite of abstract language.
Okay, we have to talk about the example given here because it's pretty astonishing. Placenta praise.
Placenta praise, yes. It's described as a gratitude practice, a word ritual honoring the placenta's role during pregnancy. It fuses maternal health, embodied experience, and spiritual devotion.
And the claim is that uttering this word does what?
The claim, supported by their internal metrics apparently, is that the utterance, especially when combined with the ritual gesture of placing palms on the abdomen, which they call palm praxis, actually alters maternal fetal hemodynamics.
You mean it changes blood flow between mother and baby?
That's the assertion, that the rhythmic repetition, the intentional articulation of placenta praise physically reduces maternal cortisol levels, potentially increases oxytocin, and optimizes placental blood flow, improving the conditions for the developing fetus.
Okay, that's way beyond just positive thinking or a placebo effect. They're talking about linguistic acoustics as a form of medicine, the word literally becoming flesh by affecting biology.
That's the ultimate validation of the intra-axis as they see it. It ensures that abstraction never gets detached from lived, felt practice. Everything is anchored in palm praxis, the hand in world, the body in action, as a liturgical, physical reality check.
And there was another example, koia dominium.
Right, koia dominium, a blend referring to a specific type of stewardship habitat, maybe linking a local place name, koia, with dominion and pium place. The key point for the intra-axis was that the very act of pronouncing this multi-syllable word is designed to activate multiple muscle groups in the torso and throat, making the utterance itself a performative micro-pilgrimage, physically embodying their ecological commitment.
So the whole delta T22 system is this cycle. Faith ignites it, ultra community adopts it, extra, practice tests it, meta, and the body confirms it, intra.
Which then potentially inspires new faith, feeding back into the ultra-axis, keeping the whole thing rotating and generating their reality. It's a dynamic loop.
Okay, so once the system is up and running, this rotation is happening. It starts to fundamentally reshape their world. Let's dig into some of the really radical applications mentioned, starting with this idea. The lexicon is infrastructure.
Yeah, this is perhaps the most startling claim of all. In this framework, things like roads, houses, markets, they don't just need language to be planned. They are seen to arise from linguistic coherency. The whole community compound becomes a kind of physical syntax. Bricks get laid, pipes get connected in rhythmic agreement with these specific hybrid words they forged.
So etymological hybridization equals infrastructural prophecy.
Yeah.
If they can't successfully forge and rotate the word for, say, a water system,
Then they literally cannot build or maintain that water system reliably, according to this logic. The linguistic failure precedes or causes the infrastructural failure.
and this allows them to build and maintain things that maybe standard colonial languages couldn't even properly describe, especially off-grid systems.
Exactly. Colonial terminology was often built around dependence on centralized grids, external supply chains. It might lack the conceptual tools needed for true self-sufficiency. Maintaining, for example, a solar covenant dwelling requires a very specific theology of technology that standard English or French might not readily support.
So they need new words like
Like sunsum synthetic, using the Akan word sunsum, meaning spirit, combined with synthetic. It describes technology that isn't just wires and circuits, but is understood as being animated by spirit. It reconciles their cosmology with their engineering needs.
we already talked about Dominion Keep for solar maintenance.
Right. It transforms a potentially mundane chore into fulfilling this deep, Edenic stewardship mandate. It ensures the work is valued spiritually and structurally, not just as a task. This linguistic sovereignty is what enables the complex coordination needed for these off-grid realities.
Okay, so language builds the physical world. What about the inner world? It seems to radically reconfigure ideas about therapy and healing, too. They call it exopsychoanalytic engineering.
Yes. Exo meaning outward. Therapy as masonry or construction.
Which is the opposite of traditional psychoanalysis, right?
So-
Which is very introspective, looking inward, talking about feelings, past traumas.
Exactly. The Kennemagorian practice flips that. It exteriorizes the psychic load, as they might put it, into shared civic repair loops. The core principle is healing is measured by construction, not confession.
So ontological problems of being, anxiety, stress, conflict aren't solved by talking about them in isolation, but by building something new, physically or linguistically,
Yeah.
together.
That's the model. It offers this powerful alternative.
Mm.
If I'm feeling friction with my neighbor, instead of just internalizing it or maybe talking to a therapist, the treatment might be to go work with that neighbor on the community fence using KinfoForge.
The shared act of repair, guided by the right word, is the therapy. It externalizes the internal conflict into a productive shared outcome.
Right, and this reframes even the most mundane labor. Think about that word, prayer work.
Prayer work. Labor as embodied intercession.
It transforms tasks we might see as drudgery, washing dishes, sweeping into liturgical acts. By consciously applying the covenantal intent encoded in that hybrid word, the whole experiential quality of the task shifts. For Miriam, maybe it moves from resentment to devotion.
That's a verbkinetic shift again, changing the feeling, maybe even the brain chemistry associated with the action through the word.
Exactly. And all of this, the infrastructure, the therapy, it rests on their most fundamental philosophical stance, which kind of underpins everything. Ontological flatness.
Ontological flatness.
Right.
Or flatant theological literalism. What does that mean? Flatness.
It means rigorously rejecting vertical hierarchies, especially the idea of a transcendent divinity way up above, separate from the world.
Right.
That's seen as a feature of colonial grammar and theology.
So divinity isn't up there.
No. In this view, divinity, the sacred, doesn't descend. It circulates horizontally through the everyday stuff, through kin relationships, through the soil, through breath, through the work of your hands. Everything is already potentially saturated with the sacred.
The sacred is immanent right
Yeah.
here. in the practical world.
Yes. And this leads to that collapse of the signifier and the signified we talked about earlier. It becomes literal.
Like the brickless example.
Exactly. Brickless isn't a word that symbolizes a blessing that comes from somewhere else. The properly laid brick, the good mortar mix, the act of competent construction itself is the blessing.
The mortar is the prayer, in a sense.
That's the literalism part. The neologism just makes audible the sacredness they believe is already inherent in competent, careful, constructive practice. It refuses that sacred secular split, using words like prayer work or tool grace to bridge contemplation and action, dissolving those imposed boundaries.
Okay, putting it all together, the synthesis seems to be that this Kanamagorian lexicon isn't just a list of words. It's a hyperorganon, a living system, almost an organism.
That's a great way to describe it, a living, metabolizing organism. Words breathe through the people, and the people's actions breathe life back into the words.
And the delta T22 rotation is the engine, the heartbeat of that organism, making sure faith, community work, practical testing, and bodily feeling are all constantly fused together.
Yes, it's that perpetual cycle of generation and maintenance, aiming always towards prometautopian.
And the ultimate goal, again, is liberation.
Yes. Hybridization is framed as the most powerful act of liberation because it aims to dissolve linguistic slavery. It's about reclaiming the power of the voice as an act of creation, not just description. It's about turning the ruins of Babel, where language supposedly divided people, into the workshops of Kenema, where many tongues, many roots can build something new together.
In their way of measuring success,
Yeah.
the Kanamagorian metric, it's so beautifully simple. Endurance proves value, not just cleverness or brilliance.
Right. Does the word survive? Does it perform daily repair? That's the only test that matters. It's about achieving semantic self-determination, defining their own reality without relying on inherited colonial concepts or external validation.
It really underscores the idea that political or economic freedom might be impossible without first achieving linguistic freedom. The basic power to name your world in a way that actually helps you build and sustain it.
It's a profound challenge to how we usually think about language.
Absolutely. So you've heard how this community is actively trying to engineer its physical and spiritual destiny, treating language itself as this metabolic constructive process driven by that rigorous delta T22 rotation. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. If speaking correctly, using words that truly build and maintain is the highest form of infrastructure, what reality are your most common words constructing for you right now, today? Maybe it's worth exploring the power of canometric actualism, trying to measure your own reality, your own community, through the lens of covenantal practice. What does your speech actually build?